Hi everyone, it's AubreyRS coming to you with my eagerly anticipated Raksha guide using Revolution++, where by the end of this video, with the gear and invent setup, alongside the tried and tested ability bar that I use, you will be able to kill Raksha consistently and with general ease. Raksha has 800,000 life points with no specific weakness, however has a higher affinity to range, therefore using ranged here is highly recommended. Raksha is immune to stun and poison, but is vulnerable to reflect damage, so keep that in mind. Raksha has a max hit of 4k, but that can also vary on Enrage and depending on the attack used. Okay, so now getting on to the interesting stuff then, with the gear setup and inventory. So I use full Pernix. I have that perked as well. I'll leave the perks on screen here for you to have a look at. I also use Ascension grips, and I believe those are Flare Frost boots. But Pernix boots are also just as fine. I use the Essence of Finality. You don't need one. Amulet of Souls or Reaper Amulet is fine. I have Darkbow spec in the Essence of Finality for anyone who was interested to know that. Ring of Death, because you're probably still going to die a few times, silly mistakes. Maybe you miss a prayer flick, these things happen. The most important part of this setup is that I use dual Ascensions with Ruby Bakrimmel Bolts E. That is so important to being able to keep your DPS up high. Now, because this guide is focusing on Revolution++, we're going to be taking all the responsibility of doing damage off of ourselves and letting the game take care of it. So we want to make sure that the Ascensions have those Ruby Bakrimmel Bolts E. It will really just buffer our DPS, and it means that we won't need to worry about damage at all, especially with the ability bar that I'm going to be giving you in just a couple of seconds. You won't need to worry about damage. You can just focus on boss mechanics, which we're going to go through. You can focus on the prayer flicks. With this setup, with this gear, with this equipment, you will meet the damage 100%. You will meet all the DPS checks, and everything will work out just fine. I have managed to hit the same DPS checks with lower gear. So I have used Shadow Glaives, and I've been able to hit the DPS check 80-90% of the time. It's not always guaranteed. But with this gear setup, with full Pernix, with Ascensions, and Ruby Bakrimmel Bolts E, you will always hit the DPS checks. So moving on then to the inventory setup, I have Elder Overload. Any overload is fine. I have a Super Prayer Renewal, and again, just anything really to increase your prayer, whether that be a prayer renewal, is great. I've got my Adrenaline Renewal, any Adren Pop will do. Only one Super Restore Flask needed. You're not going to be here very long, especially not with this setup. With this setup, after you get comfortable, you could expect anywhere between 4 to 6 minute kills, really. I have a Power Burst of Vitality, and I use that for the rock fall. Depending on my health situation, it's not quite as bad now after the nerf, where the rocks aren't just going to 2-hit you. Normally it will take 3 or 4 rocks now to kill you. So there's a bit more leniency there. You probably don't need that Power Burst now like you used to, but it's still really useful to have, especially if you're low health going into the rock fall on P3. Again, Eye of Sailfish here. As you get more comfortable, you can move to Blue Blubbers, and buffer that with the Sardome and Bruise that are in the inventory as well. I have Laceration Boots and a Scythe. I use that for clearing the pools at the start of P3. It's probably the most efficient way to clear the pools, but if you don't have access to the boots or to a Scythe, especially when you're using this range setup, you could just bring some mechanized chin chompers, and I'll take you through that as we go on through the guide here. But yeah, if you can't afford maybe a Scythe or Laceration Boots, just bring a few chin chompers, that's fine. Also, we're going to bring a ranged shield. It doesn't really matter what tier of shield it is, just any kind of shield you can get your hands on, basically. We also have the Ring of Vigor switch. That's only going to be for the very start of the fight. We're not going to be using Ring of Vigor anywhere through the fight except for the very beginning. That's the only part of the fight where I will be asking you to do some manual inputs for your DPS right at the very start. After that, you let the game take care of DPS. And then just Vuln Bombs, always trying to get into a good habit of making sure there's a current Vuln Bomb on the boss anytime during the fight, really. You want to try and maximize the uptime of vulnerability on the boss. Okay, so getting into the Revolution bar then, this is where the magic happens, my friends. So, again, this is Revolution++, so we want every single ability in this bar highlighted. We want to make sure we go into combat settings, Ultimates are triggered on with Revolution. Same with thresholds. Everything, we're just going to let the game take care of it. We're going to let the game take the wheel. We're going to sit back. We're going to focus on the prayer switches. We're going to focus on the mechanics. We're going to let the game take care of DPS. We're not going to worry. So this is the ability bar that I use. And with the equipment setup, and with this bar, you have all the DPS you need. It works very well. So this bar has just the right combination of thresholds, kind of interspersed with basic abilities to make sure that you'll still get that 100%, so you'll be using Death Swiftness automatically off a cooldown, which is ideal, really. To maximize DPS is to always be standing in that ultimate whenever you can. So whenever you start the kill, you'll be doing a standard Death Swiftness rotation yourself. You'll be doing your Ring of Vigor switch into your Adrenaline Renewal Potion. That will only be for the very start of the fight. After that, just let the game take care of it. So you got your Death Swiftness, Needle Strike, Snapshot Rapid Fire, into Corruption Shot, Tusker's Wrath, Bombardment, Sacrifice. Really useful for this boss, just to keep it topped up just a little bit as needed. Everything after Sacrifice is just filler abilities, really, just to try and keep the adrenaline kind of going through the rotation to make sure that we have that 100% adrenaline ready for when Death Swiftness is available. I do have one little trick with this bar later on that I'll explain during the kill when it makes more sense. But it's just for whenever, let's just say, you're about to phase the boss, but you can see that Revolution is going to trigger Death Swiftness. There is a way to kind of circumvent that, but I'm not going to get too far into that now. But just to be aware that I do have a contingency in this setup for if there is an issue around Death Swiftness. But you've got the equipment set up, you've got the bar. With these two things, you could kill this boss today. But now let's really explore the mechanics, because you need to understand the mechanics of Raksha. You need to know what you're looking for, especially in terms of how to prayer flick. There's two different ways of how to prayer flick in Raksha. One is more the safe way of doing it, and then the second way is a way which you'll barely need any food during the kill entirely. But yeah, let's go into that now. So starting with the fight, we get straight into phase 1, and the fight will start with 4 auto attacks. Now just take note that when we start the fight, we go straight into melee distance. We don't try and do any social distancing here with Raksha. The biggest reason why is because in melee distance, Raksha will never use the same combat style twice in a row. So that's really helpful for us whenever we're prey flicking, to know that if we have a ranged attack, we can pray ranged, and then it's either going to be magic or melee afterward. It will never be the same twice. You'll know if you're outside of melee distance, because then Raksha can use the same ability twice. So you have to think a bit more about what to do there. So moving on then, right now on the screen I'm going to have all the different animations for the 3 combat styles that Raksha uses: range, mage and melee. And this is just a process of time. It will take you some time to get used to the animations and for the prayer flicks. One thing that I do recommend is that Raksha's melee animation is a lot shorter than the range and the mage. So whenever you're standing in melee distance and you're not sure what the next attack is going to be, say the last attack was ranged, flick to pray melee. So that way, if Raksha does catch you by surprise with the melee, you'll have been praying it. And then the magic animation is a lot longer, so then you'll be able to toggle off your pray melee over to magic then. So it's a much easier way of being able to telegraph the prayers. So always, after you've prayed either range or magic and you've deflected that hit, come back to melee for a second or two just to see if the next hit is a melee. So always defaulting back to pray melee is super useful. So after you've got through the 4 auto attacks, the next move is the tail sweep. All you have to do, as soon as you either hear the growl from Raksha, or you see there's a word above his head, I think I'm not quite sure what the word is, but it appears above his head, all you do is just walk 2 steps backwards. That's all you have to do. Especially if you're in your Death Swiftness, just take 2 steps back, step right back into your Death Swiftness again, and go at it. It's all you need to do, just step away. So then after that is again 4 auto attacks, no problem. We're going to pray flick, maybe even try and get some soul split flicking in there if possible. And then the next is Shadow Bomb. Now we want to make sure that we either anticipate before the 4th auto attack, or we wait till Raksha freezes us for the Shadow Bomb and then we use Freedom. Always make sure you have Freedom available, just in case this catches you off guard. As soon as you're stunned, use Freedom and move away. That's all you really need to do here. So then for phase 1, it would be those two specials, and they'll just rotate twice through. And then the final special will be then, after the second Shadow Bomb, Raksha will do 4 more auto attacks, and then a Siphon, where Raksha will then siphon all the pools around him. Now, the best thing about this setup that I've given you with the equipment setup and the Revolution bar, you'll never see that Siphon. As long as you're using the exact same gear, and you've got the Revolution bar, and you let the Revolution bar do its thing, your DPS will be so much better than that Siphon. You'll rarely ever see a second Shadow Bomb. You'll always get to the end of P1 before the Siphon ever happens, so you don't need to even worry about the pools in Phase 1. Moving on to Phase 2, it's a lot of the same. So as soon as you phase the boss to 600k, there'll be a rockfall. I recommended the rockfall, putting on your shield and using reflect, and just continue to DPS the boss. The rocks have been nerfed a bit now, so the damage isn't as bad. So you could actually reflect most of the damage that the rocks even do to you. It's not going to hurt an awful lot. And then just keep soul split on, and just keep attacking the boss. And that, most of the time, will keep your health up. You may have to eat a piece of food here, but that's the worst it would ever get to. So after the rockfall, you're going to again have 4 auto attacks, followed by Poison Mind. Now, Poison Mind, all that happens is you're going to have some orbs that spawn around you. You can have anywhere from 2 to 5, depending on the enrage of the boss. I think it might go up to 6, maybe. I might check that. Either way, it's fine. So all you have to do is click once on the orbs. And all you have to do is just click all the orbs. You might have to move your camera a bit to kind of see where the orbs are. They're not always right beside you. Most of the time they are. But you might need to move your camera just a little bit to find any orbs in the area. So after that then is 4 auto attacks into a tail sweep. We know what to do. We're going to take 2 steps back. No problems. Followed by that, 4 auto attacks again into a Shadow Bomb. So again, either we're going to count the auto attacks, and we're going to either anticipate on the 3rd, or we're just going to freeze when we get stunned. It's up to you which way you want to do that. 4 auto attacks again into a tail sweep. 4 further auto attacks, and then we have the Siphon again. But as long as you're following this, you'll never see that Siphon. Your damage will be too good. You'll never see that Siphon. No worries. So, you've got the boss to 400k HP. The rockfall has started. This is the hardest part of the fight. Most people refer to this as P3 entry. I call it P3 entry anyway, and it's the hardest part of the fight to get right. Because at this stage, with the setup that I've given you, bar that I've given you, you need to deal with the pools here during the rockfall. So as soon as the rockfall starts, I recommend just getting a bit more extra damage on Raksha at this point. You don't need to deal with the pools immediately, but the timing of when you deal with the pools is quite specific. So you want to wait before the text box appears, and then whenever you hear the keeper saying the shadow falls, somewhere around there between the word shadow, you want to start clearing the pools with your scythe and your laceration boots. If you're using Chinchompas, I would start earlier. As soon as the rockfall starts, I would equip a shield, I'd use reflect, and I would just start clearing the pools straight away. But if you're using scythe, laceration boots, wait until the keeper says that the shadow. I'd wait for the word shadow, and then I would start. But you want to make sure you're starting to clear before you see the text box pop up on the screen. See, because Raksha will then spawn a lizard at the start of P3, which will then spawn another pool. But if you time this just right, you'll be able to kill the second batch of pools as they spawn with the first, before Raksha can get a siphon. It's quite complicated. As you practice and you get more kills, you'll kind of see what I mean. But the optimal thing to do here is wait until Keeper says shadow falls, right around there, and start your clear. Now, when I do this, for the very first pool, I like to also turn my melee prayer on, my melee boosting prayer, which I believe is called Anguish. I like to turn that on as well. Wait, no, it's Turmoil. It's Turmoil. I turn that on. That gives you an extra boost to try and one-shot all the pools on the very first batch of pools. I then have Ruthless on my scythe, which then gives me extra damage and accuracy per mob that I've killed, and that does stack with the pools. So after you've cleared the first set of pools, you're pretty much guaranteed to then kill the rest of them. So I highly recommend putting that perk on your scythe. So you're in P3, you've got the pools cleared, you've got through the most dreaded part of the fight. One thing to note in P3, always prioritize the pools. That's the biggest word of advice I can give you in P3. Everybody always struggles in P3, and that's because they're trying too hard to DPS the boss, and they're trying to skip the pools, and they're trying to ignore the pools. This is the phase where you don't really want to be doing that. If you have really good DPS, and say you've got the boss to maybe 350, 340k, by the time the rockfall has stopped, then maybe, yeah, you do have a point and you can push to get the phase there and then and not deal with the pools after the first clear. But to be honest, it's too easy to lose a kill here just by letting the boss generate a few pools. All of a sudden you're at 50% in rage and the kill just slowly starts to move away from you. It's not worth it. Prioritize the pools in this phase. So after rockfall, Raksha will do 4 auto attacks into the poison mind. What are we going to do? We're going to rotate our camera, we're going to click the orbs, no problems. Then a further 4 auto attacks into a shadow bomb. Anticipator freedom, totally up to you. 4 auto attacks again into a tail sweep or charge. Of course, what are we going to do there? We're just going to move back. Now the good thing about this phase is there is no 4 auto attacks into a siphon. That doesn't exist because the pools will be siphoned over time from Raksha. So after this tail sweep and charge, if there's about 250, 260k health left on the boss, so in other words, you're not going to get to the 200k in time before Poison Mind, I would just clear the pools at this point. It's not worth the extra enrage, it's not worth the healing that Raksha's going to get. I would much recommend that you just go after the pools after that tail sweep. And then after that, get back on the boss, wear the boss down to 200k, and then you're on the final sprint. We get into phase 4. After the cutscene plays, as you go into P4, you want to get into MD as soon as possible. The whole way through phase 4, we're going to be baiting his melee attack, because what we don't want is to be standing outside of MD after the second auto attack, because then he'll do a move a lot similar to the Shadow Bomb where he'll freeze you. Fuse you in place, and you have to either use freedom or anticipation and get out of there. But he does this every 2 auto attacks, so that means that your cooldowns wouldn't be able to keep up, and you would definitely be stunned and killed. So the idea throughout this entire P4 is every 2 auto attacks, you want to make sure you're in MD. So what I recommend is you stay in MD, and after the second attack, again, just take 2 steps out, 2 steps back in. Again, just making sure you're doing those prayer switches. It's only 2 prayer switches and then a special. And it's always going to be the tail sweep because you're baiting that every time by moving back into MD. So 2 auto attacks. You're going to step out. You're going to step in. You're going to DPS. 2 auto attacks. Step out. Step in. Next one then is Erebus Charge, where Raksha will then pull up a shield around himself and he'll charge up an insta-kill attack. Now, if your enrage is quite low, anywhere between 0 and 30%, maybe even 50 if your DPS is good, I'd recommend just killing the shield, and killing that shield will then release a lot of anima around the room, which you can then collect, which will give you a DPS boost, and that DPS boost will help you get faster kills. But if this is your first time killing Raksha, a lot like I did not bother with killing the shield. I played it safe the whole way through P4 for my first couple of kills, because there's an area where you can stand around the room behind these pylons, and if you stand behind them, after the special bar above Raksha's head is full, he'll do the insta-kill attack. But if you're standing behind the pylon, it won't touch you, and you can just go straight back into MD and do your usual 2 auto attacks, prayer flicks, walk out, walk back in again, and just chip away at the health that way. As long as you're just maintaining, clicking on the boss, you're doing the mechanics right. Again, the DPS bar will take care of itself. All you have to do is make sure that you're stepping into MD and stepping out at the right time. And that's the bulk of P4, to be honest, is just moving in and moving out. Keeping up with the prayer flicks. If you're feeling confident, go for the shield, try and kill the shield. Whenever you're running to get the anima, make sure you use anticipation before the second auto attack. So that way you don't get stunned. If you do get stunned, freedom. Again, just collect all the anima you can, move back into MD, use the special button that's then prompted on your screen to get your DPS boost, and just go ham on the boss. And that's Raksha, guys. It is a hard boss mechanically, whenever you're first learning. But as you get through it, it really isn't that bad, and as you get more confident, you can weave in soul split in between the prayer flicks as you get used to that timing for the different attacks. And the boss becomes a lot easier whenever you get used to the timing of the flicks into soul split. You'll barely use any food. Nowadays, with this setup, I'm getting 5-minute kills, and I'm lucky if I'm eating maybe 2 pieces of food. I rarely ever eat more than 2 pieces of food. But yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed the video, guys. I really enjoyed making it. This boss was an absolute nightmare on release, but I'm so glad that people are enjoying it. I just want to say a huge shout out to Mod Ryan. His passion for this project, for this boss, has been incredible. He's been around tons of streams. He even popped into my stream a week or so ago, and he was helping me with a few of the mechanics. And you know, the passion that the Jagex team have had for this boss is so clear, and the community have really absorbed the challenge. And I feel like it's a great boss for people learning PVM. And yeah, I hope you all have a great time with it. Any questions, leave them down below, and I'll see you all in the next one.